This is the hour of doom
and bloom.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Doom and Bloom Survival Medicine Hour. We are a tower of tenacity in 2021, and we are here to help you get prepared medically.
Yes.
I'm Joe Alton, MD, that old Dr. Bones, and I'm here with
Nurse Amy.
Nurse Amy.
Amy Alton. I'm an advanced registered nurse practitioner and a certified nurse midwife.
And together we're the founders of doomandbloom.net, where you'll find, over 1,300 articles, videos, and podcasts on medical preparedness. Today we're going to actually do an experiment.
Yes.
And the experiment today is that we're going to do a video podcast. And the video podcast is, for us, pretty new. We have done them before
with other people,
with PrepperNet and with Around the Cabin, but just doing it on our own. This is just an experiment, and it's going to go terribly awry, I'm sure. But I think the important thing is that we introduce you a little bit to a couple of things. One, I am not a terrorist. I look like a terrorist, but I'm not a terrorist.
No, you don't.
She is not a goddess. She just looks like a goddess.
Very
all right. So just so you know, we're going to be talking about some controversial subjects today, but most of our shows are going to be really about true survival medicine. You know, what if a loved one's sick or injured and the ambulance is heading in the other direction, or you just can't see the rescue helicopter on the horizon? Well, we are here to discuss medical issues when there is no functioning medical infrastructure.
I think you said that pretty well.
Well, thank you very much.
Explain that. I think it's easily understood.
Well, I'm well into my geezerhood, but we want to spread the word of medical preparedness, and for us, that means being on as many social media platforms as possible, and this one is going to be on YouTube. We still have our regular podcast and we still have our regular YouTube videos, but this is, like I said, something new for us, and let us know if you like it. We talk about medical conventional wisdom, and we talk sort of outside the medical conventional wisdom too, but even though we're retired, we have active medical licenses, and we'd like to keep them, and so you should listen to this.
Absolutely. All information and opinions voiced on the Survival Medicine podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not represent medical advice for anything other than post-apocalyptic settings. We strongly urge our audience to use standard and modern medicine whenever and wherever it is available.
True dat. Well, we recently passed the 1-year anniversary of my January 7th article, 2020, in which I talked about a strange new pneumonia. Matter of fact, it was called a new pneumonia. It was the article. There was a mention of a pneumonia that was popping up in a place called Wuhan, China, and had sickened a total of 60, count them, 60 people in that area. That's what we do. We sort of watch and look for things on the horizon that may turn out to be a problem. I guess I don't have to tell you what's happened since then. As a matter of fact, December 2020 was the deadliest month, according to national statistics, in terms of the number of cases and the number of deaths that we've had. And it seems to be going up and up and up. If you look at the graphs, they tell a pretty scary story. It's just basically going straight up.
Although if people are watching, then you go this way.
Oh, that's right. We'll go this way.
For our audience, it's going like that.
That's right. There were nearly 78,000 deaths last month from coronavirus, and I'll tell you, or at least with coronavirus as a cause of death on the death certificate.
On the death certificate, right.
Let's say that.
Yeah.
And health officials are telling us to expect even more in January, even though we were beginning to roll out vaccines and all that stuff. We're going to talk about that, as a matter of fact. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, what a name, basically has told us that his country is in the midst of a major apparent new strain of the COVID that's even more transmissible than COVID itself, which
70% more
transmissible. And COVID is a lot more transmissible than influenza.
Right.
The regular COVID.
Right.
So
it's figured out how to go from person to person even more than it already did.
And it's turned up in the U.S. in a lot of different places,
It's
even
here.
among
It's
people.
in Florida.
And among people that haven't been traveling. So that, I think, is an important thing to say.
Strange.
It's been
Very
around
strange.
a while, or it's another, you know what, it might just be another mutation that is just very similar to this one.
Okay.
And so that's the thing. And why are all these mutations out there? Because the coronavirus is a SARS-CoV-2 is an RNA virus. And RNA viruses are notoriously bad at replicating themselves. They don't do it correctly very often.
So what I would call them is a bad photocopier.
Right.
So if you wanted to photocopy a piece of paper, it might come out a little cockeyed most of the time. They're just not good at making perfect copies. And that's what they do. They get into your cells, they invade, and then they turn your cells into a little manufacturing production. And they're spitting out copies, except those copies of the virus are not perfect. Some of them change it and make it more transmittable. Some of them change it and don't do anything to it or make it worse. So those copies are not always improving. They're just random changes. This virus is making random changes, and I think it doesn't think itself, but I think the purpose of that is that so it can find more hosts more easily. And so I think that is the purpose of miscopying itself to make itself better.
Right. And figuring out that 1 in a million times that mutation may actually make it more infectious,
Right.
or may make it more deadly, or actually less deadly would be better for a virus, right? Because you wouldn't kill
Exactly.
those. You could last longer in your host.
If you're in your host longer,
Right.
then you have a higher chance of spreading yourself. So
Exactly.
I don't think that the goal of the virus, and again, I mean, this thing doesn't have a brain, is to kill the host that it's in. I think if that mutation occurs, just like the other mutations, it's an accident.
It's a counterproductive thing for a virus,
Exactly.
I think.
Exactly.
Now, I'll tell you, if human beings did this kind of thing, we would be a pretty diverse society. We're a diverse society as it is in the U.S., but we would be so diverse that we would be having people walking around with 5 arms and
Yeah.
3 legs
Yeah.
and 2 heads pointing different directions.
If we miscopied ourselves that frequently.
It would be pretty crazy.
Would you love me if I had an arm sticking
I
out
would,
of my head?
I would love you. And you'll be able to reach things I might not be able to.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. See?
It's gotta think of these things as a positive.
Well, anyhow, I wanted to talk about some statistics here. I got it down here. Over the past week, there were an average of 260,000 cases per day, including yesterday was 300,000 cases. That's an increase of 40% over the previous 2 weeks. More than 18,400 died from COVID, or at least had it on their death certificate in the week ending January 3rd. And that's a total of 352, I think, thousand deaths, or 1 in every 930 U.S. residents. And it's pretty kooky. And this is all according to the COVID Tracking Project, which has a lot of interesting information, doesn't always agree with state reports and things like that. And there are a lot of problems with reporting because you just don't know what you're going to get. So, some states may report very mild cases, other states may not.
Right.
They may report tests better or worse. So Alaska and Alabama may be different in terms of how they report things. So I think it's hard to get a handle sometimes on these statistics. People don't know that.
Let me mention one more thing. We also have an issue with testing. These COVID tests are not perfect. So you may have COVID, go get a test, and you get a text message or a phone call or an email from the provider who did it and says, oh, you don't have COVID, but you have COVID. Or you have a cold or possibly the flu and you go get a COVID test because you're not sure what's going on. And they tell you have COVID, but you don't. So these tests are not perfect. I actually spoke to somebody the other day, a customer, and he told me he has regular bouts of bronchitis. He's an older man. I think he said he was 80 or 79, and he's been having this for a long time. He knows the symptoms, but he called his doctor and said, I have bronchitis. And he said, well, let's just give you a COVID test. They did, and it was positive. But he wasn't having the typical symptoms of COVID, the loss of smell and the other things. He was having his normal bronchitis that he knew. And his wife was bugging him. He said, this is his words. You don't have COVID. You don't have COVID. So he went and got another test. 2 days later, it was negative. So did he have it or not?
Wow.
And then he called his doctor and said, hey, I got a positive, I got a negative, I don't know what to do. The doctor said, listen, just quarantine for a few more days, because he had moved into the basement. He called it his man cave, so I don't think he was terribly depressed about doing that. Because I had to move into the man cave, so he must have it decked out.
I want a man cave.
No, well, you can. Good luck digging one. We're in Florida. There's water about 6 inches below this house.
Yeah, underwater swimming pool.
Yes.
Underground swimming pool.
Did he have it or not? I think this might be happening to a lot of people who go get tests who, just say, oh, well, I need to get a test. I was exposed. And then they're told they have COVID. They don't have any symptoms. And maybe that test is wrong. So I just don't know what to believe anymore.
That's the thing.
We need better tests.
They say to follow the science. They tell us to shut up and follow the science. But I'll tell you, sometimes it's hard to figure out what's real science, what's
science
the truth,
is not
what
perfect.
isn't. Right, exactly. For sure. Hey, meanwhile...
So that was just a story I wanted to share.
And I appreciate it. Meanwhile, we want to report for the first time that India, the country of India, is seeing an epidemic of bird flu popping up.
Yeah.
And it's causing hundreds of thousands of their livestock to have to be culled so that they don't wind up infecting humans. Now, the type of influenza virus that is coming around is called H5N1. Also, there's another one, H5N8, and one seems to be affecting the southern part of the country. The other one, the northern part of the country.
Spreading elsewhere.
And it's affecting all sorts of their wild fowl, waterfowl like geese and
which are migrating currently.
Right.
So they're moving
to different places, exactly, and causing thousands of deaths. I mean, you're seeing a bunch of dead geese around there and dead crows.
I saw pictures. Right. It was horrible what they had to pick up. And knowing that this has a pretty high death rate, I think it's 60%.
Yeah.
At least the H5N1 has a 60% death rate.
Yes.
And for the few people that in the past it has actually infected, had a 60% death rate. But I saw them picking up, I think it was geese that had died. It was like thousands of them, just everywhere.
So herons and geese and all sorts of stuff like that is causing them to have to take their food-producing livestock and kill them. And I'll tell you, that's not a good thing in a country like India, which could use all the food it can get. I mean, It's got 1.4 billion people in that country.
Just to finish that, I just wanted to say that I saw them picking them up, and knowing that there's a high death rate, they weren't wearing any kind of mask or facial covering, no shield. He didn't have any kind of gear on. I did see some pictures with people with gear on because obviously they had it, but this guy looked like he had a pair of just latex gloves on. That was it. That was his total protection. And they say that these dead animals can transmit the virus, this H5N1 or the H5N8, even though they're dead. So he's up there picking up geese and, he could get it.
Yeah.
I mean, these people need to take better precautions. It's unfortunate. Most likely they just don't have it. They don't have the gear. The gear is in a worldwide shortage.
Right. We still are having problems getting masks.
Oh.
Right. And
yes.
For our kids, we have enough
Again, it's
right
bad
at the present
again.
time, but it's starting to get bad
do.
again. So it's pretty kooky. And actually, we donated some of our stuff in the past, so I wish maybe we had it again. But I wanted to mention a couple of things. I noticed that on our new MeWe group that there are a number of people that are coming onto a group who have not heard of us before, I just want to say that we are the co-authors of a pretty popular book called The Survival Medicine Handbook. It's now in its 3rd edition. We're beginning to work on the 4th edition, as a matter of fact, which is going to be even bigger. But that's what we do. We also have Alton's Antibiotics and Infectious Disease and Alton's Pandemic Preparedness Guide. These are just some of the books that we've come up with. We had a really popular book called the Ebola Survival Handbook. That was during the Ebola crisis, and we sort of keep track of these infections and the epidemics as they come around.
Yep.
And this Indian one is, I guess, more proof of that. So anyhow, we are in the part of the year where colds and flus usually take center stage. Now, it's not the case in 2021 with COVID around, but you still hear people say things like, don't go outside without a coat, you'll catch a cold. Well, some people equate, not being dressed enough or warmly enough with catching colds. But I want to tell you guys out there that although it's true that not dressing warm is a bad thing, but it's mostly due to getting hypothermia.
Right.
And that's something we'll talk about in the near future, much more than respiratory infections.
Right.
So being cold isn't why you get a cold, but it is true that cold weather makes it easier to get the cold or flu. Now, why is that? Many viruses actually like cold weather. They actually reproduce faster, and they are able to be a little more sturdy or more hardy in cold weather. And rhinovirus, which is the most common cause of the cold, and believe it or not, coronaviruses, but not this coronavirus, not SARS-CoV-2, but 4 different coronaviruses make up about 20% of all common colds, and they don't even get a name. They just have numbers. They're identified by numbers. And so these viruses remain infectious longer and seem to reproduce faster in colder temperatures, and that's one reason why these viruses spread more easily in winter. So
Keep talking. I'm going to check the camera, make sure it's still working.
Okay.
Keep going.
Like I said, this is an experiment. It's not just the cold in the winter air that causes a problem. The dryness of the air that you get in winter, well, that is also linked to things like flu outbreaks, because cold weather dries out and causes tiny breaks in your nasal lining, the inside lining of your nose. And, well, because viruses that cause colds and flus are typically inhaled, and usually most people breathe through their nose, well, these viruses can attach more easily if the skin of the inner lining of the nose is sort of dried out and maybe skin cracked. How are we doing?
Good.
It's working. I can't believe it. I'm not working,
I still
but
have
it's
batteries in the microphone and the receiver and on there.
So there you go. Now,
And we've been talking for 18 minutes so far, just so you know.
okay. So how your immune system responds during cold weather also matters a lot. Some say that inhaling cold air actually adversely affects the immune system in your respiratory tract, making it easier for viruses to take hold.
Yep.
Now, I've written about respiratory infections a lot, about them being more common with vitamin D deficiency. This is something that I really have been stressing over the last few months. If you read our articles, I've done a couple of articles on them. You produce vitamin D through sun exposure, but most people get less sunlight in the winter. Mm-hmm. The sun doesn't go as high in the sky, right? So 42% of Americans are known to be vitamin D deficient. It's more if you're African American, it's more if you're Hispanic. Now that's a problem because vitamin D is essential for immune system health. It really is. With COVID, folks with high vitamin D levels get severely sick a lot less often than people who have low vitamin D levels. If you have a low vitamin D level, your chances of dying are much greater from COVID, are much greater than if you had a high level. Now, what's a normal level? Most people are at about 20. You should be about at least at 30 and preferably between 40 and 60. This is what I would like to see. And the thing is, I want people to know that vitamin D tests, it's a simple blood test, just like it's just like getting a blood count done, and it's something that you might consider asking your doctor so you can see where you are with regards to that. Now, physical activity, that's another factor in winter. We'll talk about vitamin D a little bit more later.
Possibly in another show.
Possibly in another show.
Possibly in another show. I may have to cut you off.
Okay. All right.
I only have so much recording time.
I got you. Okay. Physical activity, another factor in winter respiratory infections. Most people are less active during the winter, and so they're likely to delay exercise if it's snowing out or if there are icy conditions. You're not going to want to go jogging if there's a lot of ice on the sidewalk. So instead, people spend a lot more time indoors. That means more close contact with others. This is, I think, the biggest thing that leads to disease spread. Now, respiratory viruses generally spread within about a 6-foot radius. That's why they have all this 6-foot spacing at supermarkets and things like that.
Right.
And when you're inside, unless you happen to live in a castle, you're probably going to be within 6 feet of another member of your family at one point or another, or other people. So what can you do? Now, while being wet and cold doesn't necessarily give you infections necessarily and make you sick, there are risks in winter. So here's some strategies I want to just mention. Amy, I think, has a list of them for us.
I can do it, yes.
Yeah, do that for me.
All right, wash your hands often. Wash your hands properly, too. Sing happy birthday twice.
Happy birthday.
Okay.
Twice.
Just for timing, because you want to, and by the way, make sure you wash between your fingers. Scrubbing like this will rub off what's in between your fingers. If you guys are listening to this, I'm rubbing my hands together with my fingers intertwined. Avoid touching your face. Something people do between 9 and 23 times an hour. I'm sure I've touched my face a few times. Stay well hydrated. Drink at least 8 glasses of water. It's a good goal. It could be more or less depending on your lifestyle and also
your weight.
Your weight and medications that you're taking. If you take something that dehydrates you, like a blood pressure pill or a diuretic for blood pressure, you're going to need to hydrate more. If you eat a lot of salty foods, you'll have to drink more water. Eat a well-balanced diet, speaking of food. Dark green leafy vegetables rich in immune system supporting vitamins is awesome. Think eggs, fortified milk, salmon, not fried fish, but baked fish, tuna, all have vitamin D, something you're definitely not getting enough of, like you have discussed, because of our winter sun. Stay physically active. Like you were just mentioning, even during the winter, there's lots of things you can do in your household, folks. Just because it's snowing outside doesn't mean you can't get moving. Think of when you were a kid and what they had you do in the gym. There wasn't a bunch of fancy exercise machines around. We did jumping jacks. We touched our toes. We jogged in place. We did things that you can do in your house without, thousands of dollars worth of equipment. And the gyms are mostly closed anyway. Frequently clean the hard, often touched surfaces of your home with something that's antiviral, even if it's just a little bleach in some water, 10% or a 5% ratio. Viruses can last quite a while on hard surfaces, so make sure that you are cleaning them frequently, especially things like door handles, sink faucets, things like that.
Everything in common areas.
Yep, perfect. If your nose or throat gets dry in the winter, consider using a humidifier. We actually do that ourselves because we take blood pressure medicine, and what does blood pressure medicine do? Dehydrates us, so that's really good for breathing. Keep up the mask and social distancing. Just because we're getting vaccinated, just because eventually numbers might start to go down, you can still get flus and colds. So washing your hands, taking respiratory precautions are not a bad idea. We're probably going to have to keep those masks on. I am personally predicting for at least another 2 years, sadly.
Wow. And we're going to talk about that in our next show. So make sure that you check out, we are going to be doing a video podcast for a while until we figure out whether we
want to keep doing it
or whether we just look too silly doing it. We're also
it was fun though.
Yeah, well, in the future we're also going to show off maybe some medical supplies.
That's a good idea.
Here I have an otoscope, and that's something that we may show you how to use. Also fun facts and all sorts of stuff. And I'll leave you with a joke. Why does the ghost go to a bar? Why do ghosts go to a bar?
I don't know.
For the booze. Well, that's all the time that we have for this experimental podcast. We hope you'll tune in again to the Survival Medicine Hour with Joe and Amy Alton. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Hey, please consider supporting our mission to put a medically prepared person in every family by getting some of the quality medical kits, individual supplies, and personal protection gear available at store.doomandbloom.net. Also, subscribe to this channel and other social media, including our new group, Survival Medicine, on MeWe. Thanks again.